Being in a time loop would be dreadful. The idea of having to live the same day with the same events and faces. All the while, changes are never permanent. We've seen this tiresome fate be portrayed in media such as Groundhog Day, Re:Zero, Supernatural, and Haruhi Suzumiya. But one particularly fascinating portrayal of this concept is through a My Little Pony fanfiction. On May 27th of 2019, a fanfiction user going by the name of Kodiake would publish a story titled Diary of a Time Looper. The description for this story details of a worn-out notebook that was found. The thing is, the first entry was dated to be yesterday. Off rip, the way I discovered this story was through one of those rare aesthetic TikToks. I thought it was for a movie or a classic novel. I read the comments and yeah, that was not the case. I checked out the fanfic for myself and here we are. I'm going to present the story first, and then for the latter section of this video, I'll provide my own commentary. Of course, if you want to check out the actual story for yourself, the link for not only the original will be provided, but a narrated version as well. Plus, I'll be showing various artwork and animations on screen. Enough with the yapping, let's check this baby out. The first entry is for day 32, and in said entry it says test number 28. We then have day 33. Using a combination of spells, our narrator was able to create a pocket dimension that exists outside of time, which was how the journal was able to survive the time loop. After that drop, our narrator, being none other than Twilight Sparkle, explains the situation. For the last 33 days, Twilight has been living through the 23rd of March to AR. There is no explanation as to how the loop started, nor is there a way to stop. She wakes up every morning at 7:23 AM, and throughout the day, none of the other ponies remember the loop, nor are any changes permanent except the journal. Even if she tries to stay up past midnight, she ends up passing out and waking up back at her bed. Each day plays out the same, with moments like Spike making the same breakfast and him saying the same things. So far, this is what you'd expect from your typical time loop story. Because of the method used to preserve the journal, Twilight has a bit of hope left that she can break the loop. She has talked with Celestia and Luna in separate loops, and that they have never heard of such a thing. While she's skeptical of whether they believe her or not, it's indeed true that there has never been a recorded incident of a time looper, or at least, no one who survived to tell of it. With the journal we are reading, Twilight tries to keep her thoughts straight, and we also learn that she has tried many methods of escape, only for them to fail. Twilight has also done tests, and she in fact does not age in the loops. Any of her cells that died are back the next morning. She hypothesizes that if she were to die herself, she'd just wake back up, but she doesn't want to try that out. She concludes this entry with the fact that the journal's success gave her hope, which leads us to day 34. Twilight talks about the journal more in this entry. She has to cast these intricate spells every night in order to keep the pages, which just leads to this question. If she were to forget to cast the spells, would she have lost all the pages, or just the beginning of the last loop? Twilight also brings up how this time loop can all be in her head because of the existence of the journal. She closes this entry with a new experiment to test out. Does the loop repeat the previous loop, or the original day? The answer could be her way out. This question is answered in day 37 as she experimented with a small notebook and a few notes. Twilight used the same spell on the notebook for 2 loops before letting it reset. She discovers that the loop repeats the original day, though she hardly sees this as a setback and thinks about casting spells on herself. But first, she needs to experiment with organic material. It's on day 42. We learn she tried this out with various living things, including grass, apples, and a sapling. But the results came out inconclusive. The grass turned into seeds, the apple turned to dust, and the sapling just vanished. The journal also doesn't physically age, meaning that whatever is preserving this journal could bring Twilight out. On day 43, Twilight spends the day out with her friends rather than doing research. She talks about them with such high regard in this entry, and they'll be there for her no matter what. Of course, the loops have taken a toll on Twilight, and her friends notice that, though she tries to convince them that there is nothing going on. We skip forward to day 52. Twilight tried experimenting with some bacteria, and they were able to grow. This leads her to believe that if it were possible to enter a form of suspended animation, then something bigger and more complex could escape. That last entry coincides with day 59. Twilight experimented with dead organisms, and it turns out they're unaffected. This is of course a reference to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Luckily for those of us who didn't pay attention in class, Twilight defines the principle in this quote. The uncertainty principle states that the act of observing a sufficiently small particle will affect it. no matter how delicately you do so. Okay, this is really funny to me because I just remembered Walter White is canonically a pony in the MLP verse. Moving on, Twilight thinks it may apply to her situation, though it'll have to take a bit more research and a spell to induce a state of suspended animation. It's on day 61 that Twilight decides to get a calendar. The idea never occurred to her because, well, every day is the same day, but she did miss a meetup with her friends. Even though everything is the same to them, Twilight wants to keep her schedule intact and have Pinkie gather everyone, especially since she's much better at dragging Applejack from her farm than she is. We can see the next line is crossed off, but it says, "Am I not important enough?" On day 75, things are not looking too good. The uncertainty principle, as Twilight puts it, is a dead-end angle. Nothing has been working out. Twilight has even tried experimenting with rats, only for them to end up dead. Though she doesn't give up, and we see her continue on day 129, where she still has a multitude of failed experiments. Twilight goes into more detail on the repetitive breakfast Spike makes, and crosses out how Spike puts in too much sugar. It's at a point where she's getting headaches, and her magic is starting to slip up. As pointed out, she'll either teleport too far, or slam something on her desk a bit too hard. She concludes this entry by needing a vacation with her friends. We see this vacation 2 days later on day 131. It took a bit of convincing, but Twilight managed to get the rest of the main 6 to come to Baltimore with her. She tells them it'll be for a few days, but we know it'll just be for 1 day. Cause you know, the loop. Twilight fell asleep at the nicest hotel there, and woke up to start the next loop. Still, she appreciates the break, and is ready to start the next set of experiments. Another side note, if this version of Baltimore is anything like the real-world equivalent, do they speak in a funny accent? Heading over to day 183, Twilight mentions that she's starting to get headaches again. The stress from the continuous failed tests is starting to weigh in on her even more than they previously did. I want to highlight this particular quote from the entry. "If I am truly in a box, it's locked tighter than the vaults of Kennerlock Castle. I'd like to believe that even the strongest locks can be broken given time and patience, but mine is wearing thin." Twilight starts to get irritated by her friends, mentioning how there are only so many times she can listen to Rarity ramble about dresses, and how each conversation is the same. As Twilight says, perhaps another vacation is in order. We skip pretty far into day 297. Twilight has another day out with her friends, though she speaks about how supportive they are. As we can see from her various crossed out phrases, she's becoming even more fed up with them. We skip forward again, this time to day 365. It's been a full year since the loop started. Twilight's headaches are getting worse to the point where she can't operate under the unbearable pain. Even her magic is going out of control. Here's how she ends the entry. "I need to find a way out, and soon, I don't know how much more I can take." Days 401 and 456 are pretty short, so I'll read them out myself. Day 401. "I'm a failure. I don't know if I can find a way out. Is this for me? Am I going to be stuck here until I die? Will I ever die?" Day 456. I think I can't even write it. I feel sick. There was so much blood. My magic, I lost control. She was just so annoying. I'm so sorry, Pinkie. I'm sorry. If it isn't obvious, Twilight just killed Pinkie Pie. And for those of you guys saying, "No, she'd never do such a thing," you have to remember, she's not only in a time loop, but there is a 19-minute compilation of Twilight Sparkle crashing out. This is totally happening. The next entry on day 457 has Twilight crying and hugging Pinkie Pie. Twilight is overburdened with the guilt of killing Pinkie, while Pinkie has no clue about the whole thing. Twilight points out that she was probably crying for hours. Skipping over to day 462, we learn that Twilight has been having trouble sleeping due to the repeated failed experiments and the guilt of killing Pinkie in that loop. She vents in this entry about wanting to get out of it all, the loop, her work, and her friends. There are crossed out sections in regards to Rainbow Dash, Fluttershy, and Spike. As you can see on screen, she doesn't have the kindest words to say about them. This entry ends with her wanting to disappear to Saddle Arabia. All day 500 says is failure, and day 572's entry is crossed out. Reading it just says, "I wish I could stop waking up." On day 609, it'd be funny if you got rid of the 0. On day 609, Spike prepared the usual breakfast, only this time, Twilight's magic went haywire and she kills him. This part is kind of contradictory because the entry as a whole has Twilight feeling guilty, but the cross marks say otherwise. With day 651, Twilight pretty much gives up. That's only emphasized by day 723, where she's living all three: the mundaneness of the loop, the guilt of her actions, and the hopelessness of escaping. She apologizes to the reader and her friends, while also hoping that the journal helps out whoever's reading it. On day 733, the loop continues. Here's what Twilight has to say. I woke up at 7:23 a.m. Even that won't release me. Is this some kind of sick punishment? What did I do to deserve this hell? I can't take it. I have to try again. For day 734, up until day 740, her entries are simplified to just say, I woke up, before ending the story. That ending is left open-ended. Did Twilight end up escaping? Or is she forced to endure these loops for all of eternity? I am definitely leaning towards the latter, as this whole fanfic is about hopelessness, no matter how close she thinks she is. Of course, that's what makes this story stand out from other time loop stories, as in those, the characters find a way to escape their torment. I think that also makes this loop a lot more cosmic. In most time loop stories, it's always because of some big bad, or to learn a lesson, yet we don't know what caused this loop, and so far there's no way to escape it. The loop just exists, and Twilight has to deal with that fact. She has to deal with that fact alone, as none of the other ponies don't know and will never know about it. That just makes this whole situation a lot more isolating. As we see, her friends' support can only go so far, because eventually, rather than help Twilight keep her sanity, they end up making her lose it. I think the choice of having the loop focus on Twilight adds more layers to this story. It's the obvious choice because she is the show's main character. That also means Twilight is the character we have more attachment to. Therefore, we want her to succeed and get out of the loop. But at the same time, Twilight is a genius magic user. What I'm trying to get at is that if someone as smart and powerful as Twilight can't get out of the loop, then nobody can. That just puts into perspective how insane it is. To add on to that, Twilight isn't the most mentally stable, or at least, she doesn't respond to situations lightly. Both her genius and her sanity combined make her the perfect candidate for something so hellish and eternal. I know MLP fans are tired of seeing gore of the ponies. Trust me, I am too. But should we really mark the acts Twilight committed off the table? Especially knowing her state of mind? Overall, this story serves as more than just a what-if scenario for her favorite pony, but it's also a dive into the psyche. Creepypastas and poorly disguised fetishes aside, our expectations of fanfictions are often very low. At the end of the day, they're all just creative outlets that dedicated fans and beginner writers do for fun. Nothing more, nothing less. Yet this fanfiction feels more comparable to a short story I'd read in an English class. Something like The Yellow Wallpaper, or any of the works by Edgar Allan Poe. Just like those short stories, this fanfic is, well, short. That makes it more consumable for the audience to read, but it also adds more weight. With a story as impactful as this at such a length, there's little room for flaws, quality over quantity, or less is more you might say. We don't need Twilight's every thought and action, nor do we need an account of every single day. The large numbers labeled for each entry, along with the gaps in between them, tell us everything about the strenuousness of the loop. With each entry, Twilight tries to fool us that she's fine, and that she could eventually get out of the situation. But the crossed out sections challenge that. The mysterious cause of the loop, and the hidden method to stop it, create that fear of the unknown. In the entry where she killed both Pinkie Pie and Spike, we aren't outright told she killed either. We don't know how, we just know she killed them, and now she's overcome with guilt. Since we're reading journal entries rather than a narrated story, the text we're reading is a lot more personal and human. Or pony. Time loops are fictional. There's no way for them to exist in the real world. But doesn't it feel like you're in a time loop sometimes? Being stuck in class or work all day, dealing with a crazy family, appeasing the algorithm by making videos about people's zombie apocalypse fanfictions. Maybe you have that feeling of running away or pursuing some big dream, but just can't. Then perhaps, this story has your sympathy. You may find the story relatable, or it makes you feel less alone. Those feelings I described are ones I have felt before, so reading this fanfic hit deeply with me. Of course, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. I mean, the whole idea of journaling is promoted for people with mental struggles, as it helps relieve emotions, give more perspective on their situation, and keep track of progress. Okay, that's enough. No more overanalyzing a My Little Pony fanfiction. But yeah, that was a story that grandly subverted my expectations. Was it the greatest piece of work ever? No. It's probably far from being the best fanfic ever, but for an MLP fan's pastime, it's crazy stuff. Big shout out to the TikToker that made me discover the story, as well as the artists shown on screen, and Kodiak themselves. I haven't read their other stuff yet, but if this story was good, then I assume their other stuff is great as well. Again, reading the story and writing the script was loads of fun, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video as well. A couple of weeks ago, I covered a My Little Pony fanfiction or grimdark revolving around Twilight Sparkle getting trapped inside a time loop. This story was hopeless, sad, and dreadful, yet it was only a small dip into the ocean of these disturbing My Little Pony grimdarks. Which brings us to today's video. It seemed that many of you loved my video on Diary of a Time Looper, so I decided to follow that one up with a coverage of another MLP grimdark. A popular one that a few commenters brought up is titled Blink. This one was released on August 12 of 2016 by a fanfiction user going by O'Calhoun. Before we continue on with the story, let's read the small description given to it. Teleportation. It is the best possible way to travel, as long as you don't think about it too much. As long as you don't ask where Twilight goes in that split second when she's neither here nor there. The story begins with Twilight writing "Grab her now" with blood onto the wall. She reiterates by saying it's not her blood, but it kind of is. Twilight then says this in the next line. Teleportation is just a flash, I once thought. Papoof, and you're there. I should be able to forgive myself for thinking that, but I can't. I can't forgive any of myselves for being so fundamentally wrong. We learn that Twilight feels like she's been in this weird place for about 3 days, though time flows very differently here. So how exactly does she end up there? Well, Twilight wanted to get to Pinkie Pie's place a bit faster, as she took too long to pick out her dress. In Twilight's words, teleportation is a complicated spell. Few master it. I wish fewer did. I wish it was never developed. Despite the spell's complexity, I was accustomed to it. I used it flippantly. When Twilight teleported, a perfect copy of her was made completely out of nothing, to which that copy ended up vanishing. The Twilight were following around, then fell into a huge pile of pony corpses. But they weren't just any ponies. They were all different versions of her. This made Twilight sick, because why wouldn't it? As she recovers, we learn that one of the other Twilights was still alive, just driven to madness. Twilight begins to describe her. She was thin, gaunt, had frayed hair, and had dark stains around her mouth. She'd even make weapons out of old bones. Twilight spares us the details, but we can easily infer that our Twilight had to kill the crazy Twilight. After all that, Twilight begins to have a bit of a monologue. She goes on about how cruel the process of teleportation is, and the fact that all these clones have pretty much been disregarded as trash. She then begins to bring up how there were younger skeletons in the heap. That then leads to Twilight talking about how she loved practicing teleportations when she was younger. Just thinking about the lonely deaths the young Twilights had to face just added to her turmoil. What made things even worse is that it wasn't even just Twilights in the pile. No, there were Spikes, as well as Twilight's friends. As Twilight points out, many of the corpses were all starved and dehydrated. Adding on to that, they had brown stains in their muzzles and bites taken out of them. A bit of conflict builds in Twilight's mind. Will she stoop to cannibalism for the sake of survival? Twilight decides to focus on moving around the bodies. It's noted that she has to do it by hoof because her magic isn't working. We're back at the beginning, where Twilight is writing, "Grab her now." She does this in order to save the next clone Twilight. Perhaps the next Twilight that teleports could grab onto a fresh copy, so that she could prevent herself from being trapped in this dimension, while still cooperating with the new copy. She could perhaps even help our Twilight escape. Towards the end, Twilight stays hopeful. At the same time, she's hoping that she won't succumb to the cannibalistic cravings the previous Twilights had. Our story ends with these words. Please, I plead to my other self. Please just never teleport again. I think as someone who's been consuming My Little Pony horror content since they were a little kid, this felt refreshing. I first want to say I'm a bit fatigued with the current state of internet horror regarding both MLP and outside of it. Whenever I think of MLP horror, it's either what if so-and-so pony was a psychopath, or those corny-ass infection AUs. Even tropes involving the uncanny valley, or some cosmic entity, where things I initially thought were cool are now just things I think are played out. Both Time Looper and Blink followed neither of these tropes, hence why I enjoyed both so much. To repeat a point I made with Time Looper, this story is short, so it takes advantage of that to strike a more meaningful punch, while leaving little room for flaws. There is no main villain of the story. Almost everything is within the mental anguish of Twilight and the constant battle with her mind. The minute hope of escaping, the thought of seeing versions of herself rot away, the consequences of teleportation, and the eventual need for cannibalism. The author adds in pieces to not only paint a picture into your head, but to really emphasize how horrible this scenario is. Things like the small segment about the baby Twilight corpses, and the fact that the corpses were either starved up or had chunks eaten out of them. It's neat we have an approach to the Star Trek teleporter paradox. If you don't know what that is, it's basically when teleportation involves killing someone and cloning them. So the question of, are they really the same person pops up. For this story, the answer is, fun nah. I think to make matters worse for Twilight, but better for the story, the ending is just bleak. Twilight is trying out a strategy where the main priority isn't even to save herself, but to prevent the next Twilight from facing the same fate. She doesn't even know if it'll work. I'm sure you guys have questions like, what about the first Twilight, or any of the other Twilights? After all, that ending is open-ended, and you probably want to know what happens next. Many fans of this story have made their own additions to what I call the Blinkverse. Prequels, sequels, spin-offs, and the like. And the thing is, they're all recognized by the original author, and they even organized them into a group, meaning they're canon to some extent. Now I won't go into much detail with these, as I did with the original story, but I think they're very much worth talking about. Not the First is a prequel to Blink that's a much longer story focusing on a previous Twilight. With it being longer, the story has more added plot points. These include Twilight resorting to cannibalism and using the bones as toys, them interacting with other characters that fell into the void, and Twilight going mad to the point of hearing voices. To Blink is another prequel, this time focusing on the original Twilight who learned to teleport from Celestia just to fall into the void. They thought they did everything wrong, only until more Twilight started appearing. I think this concept is cool, except for the fact that they use magic in the void in this one. This is contradictory, because we know from the original story they can't use magic. The first sequel to focus on is titled Blinking. And here, not only are we focusing on another Twilight, but we also learn that the grab her method just doesn't work. Though I should mention they use magic in this version of the void too. Plus, this Twilight tries saving another Twilight and it ends miserably. Funnily enough, this fan-made sequel has its own fan-made sequels, with a fan-made sequel being made of one of those. The second sequel on the list is titled Rapid Blink. Here, we also get a civilization of sorts in the void, and it's a lot more hopeful here, as they're able to send a report to the current Twilight, warning them of the dangers of teleportation. As for the third sequel, we have Post Blink. This one focuses on the Twilight from the main story escaping and just dealing with the trauma she experienced. Finally, we have a spin-off / sequel titled Flash, and here we get yet another Twilight who sees the writing on the wall and attempts the method to escape, but still ends up trapped in the void. However, this Twilight is much more of a scout compared to the previous Twilights. She has sandwiches prepped in her bag, plus she interacts with the other characters here and does some outdoor boys level survival tactics. I didn't want to go too much into detail on these fan works, mainly because they all vary in length and quality, plus, despite their major differences, they all follow the same premise of Twilight teleporting and ending up in the void. It really is intriguing how a fan work got praised to the point there's an expanded universe on it now. That's pretty much all I have for you guys today. Man, why can't they just leave Twilight alone? We are back with yet another MLP Grimdark made to torture Twilight Sparkle, this time with one many of you have suggested, titled Somno Captis, by a fanfiction user going by Flintlock. As I did with the previous two Grimdarks, I'll provide a summary of the story and then give my commentary later on. Of course, if you want to check out the original story for yourself, the link will be in the description. Let us begin. Tired. I'm so tired, the first line reads. Pretty much. Twilight has been awake for some time now. She's forcing herself to read a book of interdimensional phenomena as it relates to the current situation she is in. Usually, reading isn't a problem for her, as she compares the action to Spike staring at Rarity. Although she is extremely tired, and reading is making her feel weak, she even starts to hallucinate her bed. Come to me, Twilight, it croons. Lay your sleepy head on my pillow, cover your aching body with my comforter, give in to the darkness, and let your mind rest. Twilight's mind begins to wander off as her desperation for sleep grows. Despite that, she stops herself, forcing caffeine into her system with coffee and a few tablets. Keep me safe for a few hours, she says. Twilight tries to recollect the amount of time she's been in hiding. Perhaps it's been weeks since she last left. She doesn't even know if Equestria is a thing anymore, or if there are any ponies left. Twilight had to cast a force field around the castle, sending away both staff members and Spike. I'm sorry, Spike, I can't let that thing find you too, she says. I'm going to be reading these next few lines. I shudder. Even the thought of the thing seems to get its attention. The moment I even start thinking about it, I can feel its presence. A rat scrabbling behind the walls of reality, watching me, waiting for me. Infinitely patient, infinitely alien, infinitely evil. As Twilight finishes reading, she throws the book against the wall after coming up with no conclusion. From the next two stanzas, Twilight looks at the mirror in complete shame. The mirror is a contraption built by Twilight to tap into the multiverse. It also turns out it's responsible for that thing, whatever it may be. Twilight thinks to herself about whether or not it's worth destroying the mirror, considering the horror it caused. However, it might make things worse for her. Twilight just says fuck it and destroys the damn thing. After she does that, she starts to feel relieved that the horror is finally over. Guess what, there's time left in this video. It's not. She then decides to get some sleep, though she thinks it's better to clean up the mess first. When she turns around, the mirror is all fixed. This, of course, astonishes our princess. She smashes it again and again, yet no matter what, it ends up repairing itself. As written out, as I destroy the horrid device again and again, I feel the thing. It's laughing at me. After a while, I slump to the floor, hot tears trickling down my cheek. I can't move. The energy drain is too much. Pitifully, I stretch a hoof towards the coffee pot and try to pick myself up. Slowly, my eyelids shut, my breathing slows. Just a few seconds, reality blurs. The universe fades. Tired. I'm so tired. Twilight picks herself up and finds herself surrounded by these walls. There is nothing but the walls. No clouds, wind, sky, or sun. She mentions that the only sources of light are these glowing red slimes. The thing starts to approach her and causes Twilight to shrivel up inside. She spots a white light in the same horseshoe shape as the mirror and runs towards it. As she's running, the walls scrape away parts of her body. With the light growing larger, so does Twilight's joy. Suddenly, something grabs onto Twilight's leg and causes her to fall face first on the floor. This causes her to suffer a heavy injury and be covered in blood. Her pain becomes immense, and something locks onto Twilight, dragging her away from the portal. She hears a loud bell sound as a giant door appears. From just one look, Twilight's emotions go from physical pain to pure fear. Twilight begins to describe what she is seeing. I'll just read out this whole section. This thing is no rat. This is beyond anything I've ever experienced. It's like I'm a dust mite staring at the roof of an alicorn, trying to comprehend what it's looking at. Only I'm the dust mite, and the alicorn is looking back. And it's laughing. There's a sound like a planet screaming in pain. A thin line of light appears where the seam once was. Harsh, unnatural light, of a color I can't even begin to describe, sapping what little will I have left. Slowly, the line grows wider, the light pierces through me, burning me from the inside out. I slam my eyes shut, but the light pierces right through me, growing brighter, hotter. Finally it fades, blinking away spots. I open my eyes. I instantly regret it. Behind the door is a wall, an infinitely tall, infinitely long wall, made of bodies, my bodies. Beyond the door's threshold are hundreds of Twilight sparkles, slender, elegant alicorns, shriveled up crones, blank-flanked fillies, colts, even newborn fowls, still attached to their umbilical cord and covered in birth fluids, all welded together into a squirming, screaming wall. I swallow my gorge. Urine trickles onto the rock below me. Some of the Twilights resemble my mirror universe counterpart. Some are covered with scales, others have multiple heads, some have no heads, some have heads in nooses, or heads with horrific wounds. All are in pain. The wall bends in my direction. 1,000 Twilights reaching out towards me, welcoming another sister to the fold. A hole opens up on the wall, exactly my size and shape. A spot on my left shoulder suddenly flares with pain. I look down to see a bulge of liquefied fur and flesh stretching towards the niche in the wall. Several more flares of pain follow, and more bulges pop out of my skin, stretching themselves into hair-thin ribbons of liquid pony. Lavender fluid starts to ooze into the depression like molten candy into a mold. The sight of liquefied flesh triggers something in me. With a strength I never knew I had, I break the door's control and stagger back towards the portal. Long streamers of blood and liquid flesh trail behind me, ignoring the pain of being simultaneously melted and sliced apart. I drag myself towards the portal. Closer, closer, closer. The world grows dim. I slump to the ground. Just give up. Let the wall take me forever. There's no point in fighting. No matter what I do, it will get me. After all, look at the countless other Twilights it caught. They tried. They failed. Why would I be any more successful? No. Shaking off the treacherous thoughts, I reach a hoof out towards the glowing outline. There is a jolt and a flash of light. Tired. I'm so tired. After this horrible experience, Twilight wakes back up. She finds herself next to the mirror, still in pain. Twilight is beyond relieved that she is alive, but when she remembers the wall, she gets sick to the point of throwing up. As she recovers, she drinks some coffee. The beverage burns her, yet Twilight moves past the feeling. She picks up a book, insisting that there is a way to stop the craziness. Our story ends with these words: I have to find an answer. Soon. Because I'm tired. I'm so very tired. So that was pretty insane. I think my two main flaws are with some of the grammatical errors and how fast the pacing is. The story starts off with Twilight fighting to keep herself safe, and we don't really know why until later on. Although, she's losing sleep in the process. We get bits and pieces sprinkled throughout, starting with Twilight reading the books, her looking at the mirror in shame, and then the whole climactic scene where she's face to face with this thing. Our reasons for what is going on and why it's going on are given to us bit by bit, yet nothing is fully detailed. Our little knowledge preserves the unknown. Plus, with Twilight waking up at the end, we don't even know if anything that happened was even real. My neighbor's mowing their lawn. I hope you guys don't hear that, but yeah. The reveal of what this thing is really paid off. I really hope you guys do not hear that. We knew it was a multiversal cataclysm, but unless you saw art of this fanfic prior, you wouldn't have expected it to be a grotesque chimera of Twilights. I think the thing, being what it is, emphasizes the idea of it being the consequences of Twilight, which brings up another point. Twilight, being the alicorn that she is the only pony we know could cause such a thing, and is the only pony who could put an end to it. The ending leaves a lot of room for discussion. Of course, there's the question of, was any of that real? But also, what exactly is this thing capable of? And is there any way of stopping it? It's not exactly a happy ending, but it's not entirely hopeless either. If I were to compare it to Blink or Time Looper, which you can check out my videos on those, I'd say I enjoyed it more than Blink, yet I still prefer Time Looper. I have this huge book that compiles many of H.P. Lovecraft's work into one, and I can say, there might be some inspiration from him in this. Not a one-to-one, but I can feel his influence. Can't say for sure though. I can feel the vibe at least. I'm not saying that because it's a short story with cosmic horror. I'm also saying that because the way the story is written and structured is very similar to Lovecraft's style. Like, we have a character going through some kind of turmoil, and then the entity behind the chaos is revealed later on through its nightmarish description. Okay, so maybe that statement wasn't enough to convince you. It's kind of difficult to explain what I mean unless I read one of H.P. Lovecraft's work out loud, and we don't have time for that, so just take my word for it. Overall, a great story that gave me a good enough fill of cosmic dread. Funnily enough, the way I discovered the story wasn't because of the comments, it was because the He Ate Them guy told me about it. It just so happened many of you guys in the comments suggested it. My next video won't be an MLP Grimdark, though it'll still be some kind of horror story. Still, I will continue to make videos on MLP Grimdarks. Right now, I'm ogling the Applejack sleep experiment, so stay tuned. I should also address the elephant in the room. There is a chance I added Horror AU in the title. Some people have expressed their problems with me doing that, and I get that, so here's my response. For one, these stories are still alternate universes. No further explanation needed. And second of all, Horror AU will give me more clicks compared to a word like creepypasta, grimdark, or fanfiction. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I do feel like it's worth addressing. And now for the last thing I want to talk about. While I do think that horror AUs and other horror-like stories are fun to talk about from time to time, as I've openly said on this channel, it's not something I'm very passionate about. I try to switch it up, and sometimes it works out, like with the Pokemon creepypasta vid, and the TF2 vid, yet some topics are a far cry from what I usually do, and those topics are ones I'd much rather do. Unfortunately, I've had videos like the Urban Legends trilogy and the Wii Horror Games video just not do so hot. I just had to accept that my audience would rather see more AU content than the stuff I want to make. And clearly, the algorithm favors AU content, while also not pushing my non-AU content as well. I don't think YouTube is something you should do just for the numbers, but I will be open and honest when I say this. Seeing something you put a lot of work into just flop so hard is so disheartening. There, I decided to suck it up and start a new channel titled K Valentine, or at my K Valentine. I actually re-uploaded my Wii horror games video on there. If you enjoyed that video, or the Urban Legends trilogy, or even the Flash games video, expect more of that on there, plus some other more personal passion project stuff, both horror and non-horror related. With those videos, I want to put as much as myself into them, while also pushing myself to the limits in terms of quality. I'd love for you guys to give it your support. Do not let you stir that away from this channel though, as I'll still upload on here, just more horror AUs and other horror stuff. If you enjoyed today's video, feel free to like, comment down your thoughts or any topics I should cover, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like it. Also check out my Patreon if you want to support me and gain some cool perks. Take care of yourselves, and of course, as usual, please have yourselves a damn good one.